Israeli Nazionist regime doomed as Fuhrer Bush negotiates surrender. November 10, 2015. Benjamin Fulford.net. George Bush Sr. and his Nazionist faction are negotiating surrender, according to CIA sources. The Nazionist regime of Benjamin Netanyahu is also doomed, as are their Saudi proxies. The storm of information poured out by the internet, the new Gutenberg press, has made a critical mass of people aware of the enormous crimes of George Bush Sr. and his Nazionist cohorts. The result is that at age 91, Bush, who said he was retired and no longer talking to the press, felt obliged to put out a new autobiography where he tried to throw henchmen like former Defense Secretary Donald Rumsfeld and former Vice President Dick Cheney under the bus, essentially trying to blame them for the excesses of the George Bush Jr. regime. TheGuardian.com. With its Halloween attack on a Russian airliner, the Israeli regime has also doomed itself by arrogantly attacking the three great powers of Russia, China, and the United States. The result is Israel is under a full military blockade that will not end until Netanyahu and his fellow war criminals make an unconditional surrender, according to Chinese, Russian, and Pentagon sources. Their so-called Samson option of taking the world down with them has now been neutralized, the Pentagon sources say. George Bush Sr. began to negotiate surrender because he recognized the checkmate situation he faced. White Dragon Society sources say Bush's top lieutenant in Asia, Richard Armitage, ratted on Bush last week when he was questioned by officials connected Joseph Dunford, the new top U.S. military commander. Pentagon sources said, under questioning, Armitage admitted he ran the heroin side of the Bush Mafia business, they said. In addition, we can now confirm from South American sources that Maurice Armitage, the mayor of Cali, Colombia, was running the cocaine side of the business. The new peace deal in Colombia between the FARC rebels and the Colombian government has cut drug funding to the Bush-linked Sinaloa cartel to such an extent that hundreds of their goons had to fly to Saudi Arabia in order to find work as mercenaries in the war against Yemen, the Pentagon sources said. Mexico's move to decriminalize drugs is another factor cutting off funding to the Bush Mafia, the sources say. The result is that Jeb Bush's campaign has run out of money. George Bush Sr. himself may soon no longer be able to afford the massive bodyguard presence he needs to keep himself from being hanged as a traitor. The Bush oil and drug network run by the Nazionist ISIS proxy army in the Middle East is also being systematically dismantled. Bush CIA asset Ahmed Chalabi was heart attacked last week. Edition.cnn.com, because he was opposing the secret Iranian-Russian Pentagon war in Iraq against the ISIS Zionist proxy army. The Pentagon sources said this is cutting off the flow of oil money stolen by Bush and his proxies during the illegal invasion of Iraq. This means their ISIS mercenaries are no longer getting their paychecks, and so are no longer willing to fight outside of Iraq as well. The situation in the Middle East is now coming to a climax of sorts, with the Russian, Iranian, Pentagon offensive completely changing the political and strategic map of the region. The Saudi oil fields near the Yemeni border are now being overrun by Yemeni forces backed by the Iranians, Russians, and U.S. military. English.farsnews.com. The result is the flow of Middle Eastern oil money to the Rothschild family is also being cut off. The Rothschilds reacted to this situation in what only can be described as a suicidal move. When they ordered the shoot-down of the Russian airliner on Halloween, they followed this up with what amounts to a confession of the crime by celebrating the massacre with tasteless cartoons in their Charlie Hebdo magazine. The shooting down of the airliner was obviously an attempt to punish Egypt for working too closely with the Russians, since it has stopped tourist flights into Egypt and endangered 70% of Egypt's tourist revenue. RT.com. However, Russia and Egypt have reacted by making a move into Libya, thus cutting off the oil money the Rothschilds stole, following their overthrow of the regime of Muammar Gaddafi. Russian sources sent this writer an email, still unverified, claiming that Jacob Rothschild and David Rockefeller had already been killed in retaliation. This may be disinformation because the same email also says that if either of these individuals appear in public, it will be a look-alike and not the original. Time will tell, but in either case, if I was a Rothschild responsible for this atrocity, I would not be sleeping well at night. In any case, the Jewish people are finally waking up to the fact Israel is, as it is presently run, is a not Zionist and not a Jewish state. The head of the largest Jewish group in the United States, Rabbi Rick Jacobs of the Union of Reform Judaism, came out publicly last week against the horrendous actions of the Netanyahu regime. PressTV.ir. War criminal Benjamin Netanyahu is due in Washington, D.C. today to meet U.S. corporate government spokesperson Barack Obama. He will be asking for support for his regime, but it will not be forthcoming. Sources in the mysterious Dragon family are saying that Israel will end up as a Jewish autonomous zone inside a greater regional entity. What remains to be decided is what will happen to the Middle East as a whole. Either the Middle East will become a loose Muslim federation consisting of all states in the region, or it will consolidate into Neo-Ottoman and Neo-Persian Empire spheres of influence. At a higher level, this issue is going to be settled at a 100-nation meeting on, quote, global warming, scheduled for the end of this month in Paris. TheStar.com. This meeting, to last from November 30th to December 11th, will include the leaders of European nations as well as Russia, the United States, China, and India. Since global warming is pseudoscience, it is a good bet they will be talking about the more general issue of how we run this planet. While Russia is making a big splash in the Middle East, some very interesting power plays are now being carried out between the United States and China as well. As we reported recently, the United States military has taken over the Federal Reserve Board operations inside the United States. This did not go down well with China, which was in coordination with the Europeans, making its own move to take over the international operations of the U.S. dollar. This titanic struggle can be confirmed through shipping indexes that cannot be manipulated by bank supercomputers. What we see here is that the Baltic Dry Index, the price for shipping commodities, has fallen to a record low. So has the Shanghai Containerized Freight Index, the price of shipping finished goods from China. Another index that has hit a record low is the U.S. load-to-truck ratio, meaning the amount of goods being put on trucks from ships. All these indexes should have been up in the run-up to the U.S. Christmas season. The fact they are at record lows implies a stop in the flow of goods from China to the U.S. Wow. Another way to put it is that the Chinese have said, quote, we will not accept your IOUs anymore. ZeroHedge.com. The Russians, for their part, have told the Chinese they do not need to worry about their oil from the Middle East being cut off either. The fact the Pentagon withdrew its last aircraft carrier from the Middle East months ago makes it clear they are no longer in the business of cutting of oil for the benefit of the Khazarian mafia. However, the U.S. Navy last week set off a blank Trident nuclear capable missile from the coast of Los Angeles towards Russia and China. The U.S. Navy last week set off a blank Trident nuclear capable missile. Yeah, that was what the Houston Chronicle reported, that it was a dud missile. It didn't seem like it made sense. From the coast of Los Angeles toward Russia and China. Okay. The message seems to be, quote, "We are ready to go ballistic if we have to." Yeah, that sounds about right. This is horse trading at the highest level. At more esoteric level, we are beginning to see what appears to be the hand of the mysterious dragon family. Chinese Premier Li Keqiang and President Xi Jinping both visited Queen Elizabeth recently, where they were shown dragon family documents, according to White Dragon Society sources. The creation of these documents was arranged by the Southeast Asian branch of the dragon family at a secret meeting in Singapore. There was a secret meeting. There was a public meeting that was reported on. They acted as intermediaries between the royal families of Europe, the royal families of Asia, the White Dragon Society, the Chinese Communist Party, and the Pentagon. A visible result of this last week was the first meeting between the heads of state of Taiwan and China in 66 years. That was what was reported on publicly. After the meeting, Taiwan was rewarded for its role in acting as an intermediary between the Asian and European royal families, with an invitation to join the China-led Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank. Yeah, they've got lots of power to throw around now, don't they? The hidden theme behind all of the events described above is that humanity is waking up to the fact that the psychological process of deciding what we do in the future has been stolen by gangsters. Humanity is now coming up with processes to allow the people to choose what sort of future we want to create. That is what all these high-level meetings and intrigue are really about. Babylonian debt slavery is ending. Freedom is coming.